Companies are forcing workers to return back to the office. You yourself might have had to deal with this recently. No more rolling out of bed, slumping into your chair, logging in from the comfort of your own home, all while wearing a bathrobe. It's time to get back to waking up early, showering, getting dressed in uncomfortable business casual attire, sit in traffic while you think about reasons to quit, and beat yourself up for not getting gas the day before because you really thought you'd leave the house 10 minutes early so you could fill up before work. But why? Why are you being forced to go back to the office? You were doing great. You met all your deadlines, all your quotas, you just had your annual review and you're meeting or exceeding expectations, and you even got an annual 50-cent raise. Is it because they found out everyone that works there was watching Netflix in the background? Or that you were mindlessly scrolling through TikTok on your downtime? Because if that's the case, you can take on more work. You just had a few minutes to yourself.
I finished my paperwork and just had a couple minutes.
Okay. Nice to meet you.
Actually, on second thought, maybe you should just quit. The job sucks anyway. Just quit. Little do you know, that's exactly what your company wants you to do. They want you to quit. That's why they're forcing you to come back. A survey by Unispace showed that 51% of employees were reluctant to come back to the office. I don't know about you, but that number seems pretty low. I don't like using anecdotal data, but just about every person I know and all the comments online seem to be overwhelmingly against going back to the office. That's still not going to stop employers from demanding that people return. They don't believe that BS they're selling about working closely together or being more productive. They know that isn't true, and there's data to back it up. A study detailed by Fortune showed programmers that work remotely had a reduction of 35% in employee churn and an 8% increase in code written. Another study using employee monitoring software showed that a shift to working remotely during the pandemic boosted productivity by 5%. So if production isn't the issue and there's data backing it up, there shouldn't be this nationwide mandate for returning to the office. On the surface, it seems like a win-win. Workers don't have to deal with commuting to work, and employers have people that overall are more satisfied with their job and work-life balance. But the reality is, forcing people to come back is just code word for layoff. But for your company, it's actually way better than that. They know people are gonna quit because in the last few years, they've adjusted their life and schedule to working remotely. That hour they used to take to get to work is now used to take their kids to school. Or they moved out of the city they used to work in. Or they just straight up don't want to pay for gas, and going back to the office pretty much means a reduction in funds between gas, wear and tear on your car, buying new office attire, eating out for lunch because you forgot to pack something before you left. These companies not only know this, they're counting on it. With all these people quitting on their own, they get all the benefits of a layoff, like cost cutting or allocating those funds elsewhere, and they don't have to deal with any of the negatives like unemployment claims, severance packages, or just plain old bad optics. The other reason is straight up commercial real estate propaganda. About 20% of office spaces in the US are currently empty, and in places like Silicon Valley, that number is more than a quarter of all office space. That's higher than it was during the 2008 financial crisis. Every quarterly budget review had a ton of operating costs going towards buildings that no one was even using. It shouldn't even really matter though, should it? It's money that was going to be spent anyway had the pandemic never happened. Only it did. And a lot of these companies have to answer to shareholders as to why X amount of dollars are being spent on empty buildings. Some of these companies own the actual buildings and others are renting from landlords who pretty soon are going to be stuck with these buildings and aren't going to be able to pay off the commercial loan they have on them, which in turn is going to hurt the banks that gave out the loans in the first place. And most of these banks are smaller regional banks. If you've seen the news the last few months, you probably saw the headlines of a few smaller banks failing. So it's not like these banks are in a position to deal with these defaults. Think of it as someone owning residential rental property and not being able to find any tenants, and now being stuck with the mortgage. It's the same concept, except this isn't some side project you were inspired by watching an episode of Property Brothers. There's about $1.2 trillion of office loan debt, and a lot of that is due next year. Refinancing isn't an option because these properties are worth less than they were, and rates are high. So what are the options? Well, the options are to default and foreclose, or have companies pay them rent, which requires you coming back to the office, hence the propaganda. There's other reasons like managers just not trusting their employees, and I'm sure there's legitimate challenges when it comes to training new hires. But is most of this just productivity paranoia? There's a new study that was done by Microsoft that showed that 85% of leaders agreed that the shift to remote work has made it challenging to have confidence that employees are being productive. Almost half of all managers with remote employees struggle to trust them to do their best work. This honestly sounds like one of those relationships where the other person is just breathing down your neck 24/7 and doesn't like it when you leave the house, and then when you do leave, they're constantly checking your location. The fact is, we already knew these jobs could be done remotely, but there's this major trust issue going on here between management and employees. Even though meetings have increased exponentially, managers not being able to see employees makes them pretty pessimistic about their work habits. Maybe it's just the natural dynamic between boss and their subordinates. I thought it was worth noting that the majority of leaders who felt this way were in their 50s and 60s, and that leaders under the age of 50 were a lot more open and accepting of remote work. That's according to a survey from Future Forum. There's obviously a generational divide here. Even Elon Musk believes that his own employees at Tesla and SpaceX were just pretending to work and that he wanted them to be visible. He even went as far to say that remote work was morally wrong. His argument is that there's people who have to work in factories while others get to work from home from the comfort of their couch.
It's like really, you're going to work from home and you're going to make everyone else who made your car come work in the factory. You're going to make the people who make your food that gets delivered that they can't work from home. The people that come fix your house, they can't work from home, but you can.
I found this statement to be really odd, and I wasn't really sure that he believes that. By that logic, sitting in a nice air-conditioned office with free coffee and snacks is still morally wrong, so what difference would it make? Maybe he was just trying to get blue-collar workers to fight with white-collar workers. I just found it bizarre. Although Tesla, I'm sure, benefits from people commuting to the office. People that get fed up paying for gas are going to turn to EV cars, a segment that's dominated by Tesla. Maybe there's some legitimate reasons for some employers to want their employees back. But make no mistake, there's huge money involved that you might not be fully aware of, and that is being all disguised in false talking points like better productivity and working closely together. It's all BS. But don't worry, working in the office isn't as bad as it looks, because on the last day of every month, there's pizza. There's a 2-slice limit on that though. I recommend getting a cheese and a pepperoni one. Oh, and also on Friday, you get to wear jeans, because it's a casual Friday. No t-shirts though, it's not that casual. What do you think this is?